This program is brought to you by Emory University.
Okay, so thank you very much, first, Professor Feynman, for inviting me and having me here, and thank you everyone for coming to listen. The title of my talk today is Rethinking Responsibility in Private Law, but I want to emphasize that this is a new project that I'm working on, and it's kind of a work in progress. So every thought, comment, criticism you may have, that would be greatly appreciated. So this project that I'm working on deals with rethinking responsibility both in Israel and in the United States. And while pretty much have figured out the Israeli law part, the American law part is why I'm here. And the project arose from troubling observation that about two processes, parallel processes that have been currently going on in the Western world in general, both in Israel and in the US, which are greatly influential on the way that we as ordinary citizens, people, can shape the public arena, the public sphere, our lives. So the first process is the rise in power of the big corporations. When I say big, I mean the multinational, the huge ones that we all know and love. And the second process is the diminishing power of the state. So I'll talk about both these processes and then move to describe my project. So regarding the rise in power of the great big corporations, it is manyfold the power that these corporations gain. It has many manifestations. The first is the economic power that exceeds that of many states. Studies show that out of the first 100 largest economic entities in the world, more than 60 are corporations, right? So that makes Walmart a larger economy than Sweden, for instance. Makes Toyota a larger economy than Israel. The US is safe at the top. Also, another manifestation of the rising power of corporations is the political power. We all know the lobbying and the Citizens United decision. Corporations influence our physical surroundings. It's not just billboards, it's not just shopping centers, it goes all the way to the British petroleum leak in the Gulf of Mexico, right? The huge ecological disaster that a private company induced, okay? Identity shaping. Remember Naomi Klein's No Logo research that talk about branding and how am I an Apple user or am I a Microsoft person or do I use Facebook or do I use Twitter? All these have great influences on who we are and what we signal out to society. Corporations also have a huge impact on the labor market. In Israel, for instance, 1/3 of the workforce is employed by the big corporations. Okay, 1/3. This is huge amounts of influence. And it's not just influencing the wages of these people and the way that employers' rights are protected. It influences much wider things, such as women's position in society, right? If these corporations do not have women on their management boards, then this conveys a message to society. If women earn less money than men, then this has a great impact on the way our social sphere and our lives look like. Balance between work and home, okay? They're mostly determined within these large corporations. So all of these processes together, all of these things, all of these influences create a situation whereby corporations centralize huge amounts of influence and power. This is happening parallel to the decrease in the strength of the state, which is happening both from within the state with the move from a rather welfarist economy to a super neoliberalist one, and the privatization processes that we all know, and from without, with globalization putting pressure on states from without to comply to certain standards, such as the World Bank, and if, say, Israel wanted to join the OECD, for instance, that it needed to comply with a lot of demands, not just the currency issues, but it had changed our government structure, right? The Attorney General shouldn't have so many authorities, okay? The actual things that have actually happened. So and these new standards don't necessarily reflect what the Israeli people thinks and wants, but it's a pressure from without on the state to comply with outside standards. So what is happening is that the market is becoming increasingly the locus of everything that's happening, right? We go to the market not just to buy food or cars or iPads. We go to the market to buy health and to buy education and transportation and everything. Our ability to shape our public sphere, our public arena, our way of life, our communities is being mediated all the time by these huge corporations. Now, having said that, for me, it triggered the thought that we need to rethink about the legal categories that arrange our lives. The classic division to private and public has a lot to say about this, and I think it is becoming more and more problematic, right? We're used to thinking about private law and public law, whereas the private is governed by norms that are enhancing competition and safeguard freedom and autonomy, while the public is dealing with responsibility and public interest, okay? Coca-Cola doesn't have to make jobs, right? But I think in light of all these changes, something needs to change, because these huge corporations, which are private actors, have so much to do in our societies that we need to hold them more responsible for the conduct and for the implications of the conduct than before. So the point of the article is that the public-private divide as a starting point to think about responsibility in the private law domain doesn't work anymore. It's not sufficient. It's not giving us the outcomes that we need. Now, I'm not saying that in private law there aren't any responsibilities on private actors. Surely there are, but A, not enough, and B, we need to conceptually think about this differently, and this I will, in a few minutes, talk about using Martha's vulnerability project and ideas about responsibility as well. So my goal in this paper is double. The first one is to map out the main avenues in American law that do impose responsibilities on private entities, and to show that these avenues are very limited in what they can afford us with. Just for purposes of comparison, in Israel, one of the main ways to have private bodies responsible for their actions is called the doctrine of hybrid entity, right? The court can say that it can scrutinize private bodies as well as public ones, and hold them accountable for enhanced responsibilities of fairness and equality, not only if they're linked somehow to the state, as the state action doctrine requires here in the US, but also if it's a monopoly, or also if it's providing a vital service, right? So the electricity company in Israel is considered a hybrid entity, for instance, and it was held many times accountable for its conduct. In the US, I know that it wasn't, because state action kind of immunes a lot of private corporations from scrutiny. So while the Israeli doctrine is wider than the American state action one, it is still not enough. And this, I just want to give you an example for a case that happened in Israel, and to show you how. About a year and a half ago, we had a campaign in Israel to encourage people to donate organs and to sign donor cards. And the organization that initiated this campaign thought about having like these huge posters on the sides of buses to show people who have made these and how great the idea is. And the buses were belonged to a private company. The problem was that the route of the bus went through ultra-Orthodox religious neighborhoods. Now, ultra-religious in Israel do not like having pictures of women. Any kind of pictures of women, decent and everything, they think it's immodest. Immodest. Anyway, there was a problem with that, and what sometimes they do is they torch like these huge billboards with pictures of women on them. So the bus company said, look, we're not going to do that. And so they took out women from the campaign altogether. Okay? So a group of citizens appealed to the court about that, saying that this abolishes women from the public sphere altogether. And it's still pending. But I think this is a classic example and shows exactly what the problem is, right? On one hand, we have a private body, a bus company, that the behavior of which is critical to the way that we see our lives, right? If women are not part of our society, like in terms of we look around and we don't see any women posted on. So this is critical for the way our lives are, on one hand. And on the other hand, this is a private body, and you can't do anything, even not under the Israeli wider doctrine. And just to follow your writing, Martha, about this is a classic case where inequality is not attached to a person that suffers from discrimination, but goes to the root of the societal structure. The absence of women from public arena is much more than just admission of a person in or not. And surely in the United States, doing something about that would be even more difficult because state action is narrower. So just to say, if you have any examples about American law, that would be much appreciated. The second part of my project is to suggest that we should do away with the public-private divide as long as it is done for the purposes of having private bodies immune. Okay? So maybe public and private have a lot of philosophical value in other places, but not as a gatekeeper for judicial scrutiny. And what I think we need to do is to just look at every case and decide case by case, not having this a priori division. And how would we decide? Okay, so I'm trying to develop and to conceptualize a few tests and factors that would be filtered into every decision. And the two organizing concepts of this, again, is vulnerability on one hand and responsibility on the other hand. And I hope they can help us rethink this whole idea of responsibility in the private sector. So first, I really want to emphasize that it needs to be case by case to make sure that we're not going to hold private persons accountable for the evils of the world. It needs to be really powerful actors within our societies. And I was thinking along the lines of the more power that the private body has in our lives, the more involved in our lives it is, the more interwoven it is to our personal lives. Think about Gmail, think about Google, right? It's omnipresent in our lives. We can't imagine our lives without that. Then it should be more responsible for its conduct, even if it's private, okay? Think about the food industry, okay? We're just talking about the beverages and what we have on the plate is the result of a decision of, I think, 5 huge companies, Cargill and some others. They are a central actor in our lives, and we cannot hold them accountable because they're private, okay? So power is one thing, case by case is another thing, involvement in our lives, a network of relationship, the interdependence between ourselves and this private body. And another thing is if this private body benefits from the practice, okay? The idea of vulnerability is the idea that gives this whole project its social and philosophical context. The concept according to which vulnerability is universal and it reflects the human condition in a way that is relevant for a political and legal sphere is exactly what gives, I think, power to this idea of responsibility in private law. The way that vulnerability is expressed here is double, I think. First, it is clear that those who are being hurt by the conduct of huge corporations are the more vulnerable groups in society, right? The people who do not have health insurance, the people who live far away in secluded communities, women, as we saw. But there's another aspect of vulnerability which is a bit more general, I think, here, a bit more universal, and it relates to all of us as citizens who are vulnerable vis-a-vis those big corporations who mediate our accessibility to shaping our public sphere. Okay, so everyone, every private person, every individual in society is in a sense exposed to the power of these great corporations. And I was thinking about two more examples that would maybe show how this would play out. And then I'll stop talking and you can tell me what you think. First one is a case we had in Israel about Dubek. Dubek is a cigarettes manufacturer, the largest in Israel. And the Israeli parliament made a law, like it was a trend throughout, of not being able to smoke in public places. One of the municipalities in Israel appealed to the court to demand that the costs of having this law enforced would be levied on Dubek, on the company. Of course, the municipality said it costs a lot of money and we would need to have inspectors. We can't afford it. They enjoy it. Let them pay. Of course, the court dismissed the claim because they do not have such an obligation under the law. The prohibition to smoke in public places is targeting the smokers themselves and not the company, and therefore this is something the municipality should take care of. And I think that underneath this whole debate of the court lies this public-private thing, right? Why should it be the municipality's responsibility to take care of something that the company is doing, right? Because I think that what the rationale of the court's decision is that the public interest lies only at the door of public entities. Only public entities, only municipalities, only the state need to make sure that the public interest is kept. While the company that is making a lot of money off this is private, then no, they shouldn't be held accountable. And if you think about this case in terms of the factors that I was talking about before, they're highly involved in our lives. The product is, very intimate, right? Interwoven into our lives. They are the ones who benefit from having cigarettes sold all over the place. Why not have them be at least partially responsible for the cost that the product creates? Another example is a case of a health provider in one of the cities in the south of Israel. It's about 2.5 hours from a hospital, and it doesn't have any doctors after hours. Okay? No emergency care, nothing. Now, most of the people who live there are insured by one healthcare provider. And the question is, should the healthcare provider be obligated to open a branch for emergency medicine in this remote settlement? And this is exactly, I think, the point where responsibility and vulnerability help us think about it, not in terms of, well, they're a private company, they can do whatever they want, right? If it's in their best business interest, then they would. If it isn't, it isn't. And I think that we need to think about these things differently. Everybody's insured in that health provider. The network, the interdependence between the health provider and the residents of this town are very connected, right? It takes a lot of trust to become, to be taken care of by doctors. It's ongoing relationships. They're making money off of these people all year round, okay? And there's the vulnerability of being, living very far away from other communities. So I think all these factors need to be at least considered when we're thinking of should we or shouldn't we obligate them to have a branch of emergency medicine in this remote settlement. And I think this case is kind of like the one that was debated in America about the U.S. Steel Company in Ohio, that they just shut down the factories. They had factories that the entire town, I think it's Youngstown, was dependent upon. And the management just decided to shut them down. While the workers wanted to buy them from it, the company said, no, we're shutting it down. It's not profitable. An entire community was dependent on it. And it was very interesting to see that the court did say that these plants were a dominant factor in the lives of these residents and in the lives of their families. And it's really a nice passage of the court's decision, talking about how important it is and how there's interdependence and how it's part of the community and the community ethos and all that. And then, but there's nothing for me to do because the plant owns the property and he can do whatever he wants with them. So my point in this whole project is exactly this, to change the discourse so that issues of responsibility and vulnerability are taken into consideration even in private law and not just when the state is concerned. So that's it. I'd be really happy to hear your comments and thoughts. Yeah.
First, thank you so much. It's really interesting and very nice for those of us that were just at the seminar on vulnerability and law that talked about the welfare state and
Exactly.
in harmony with what you're talking about here. Yeah, I had a couple thoughts. I noticed, I guess just because of time, you couldn't get to the second part, talking about the role of the state and the weakening of state institutions as the other part of this puzzle,
exactly.
growth of corporations. But I wondered, and maybe this is only part of your project, this is what's in the outline here, but where international law, it seems to me that this, because the corporations have become so transnationalized, I just wasn't sure why you were looking at state models, a singular state model as being the best method to deal with.
I'm not really looking at international law. Maybe I should, but I think that it's not strong enough yet. I don't think that the mechanisms of international law have more power than the state ones. Actually, I think that they work more with the corporations. It's the same people all over. I mean, the World Bank and all this. It's kind of the same thing. I think, maybe I'm wrong, and I'm happy to look into it, but I think that we haven't gotten to a point where international law can really enforce more responsibility on these huge private actors than states can. Maybe states can't either. Maybe that's just hopeless. But we need the revolution that we were talking about earlier. But
it seemed like perhaps a response that involved both, that did provide for a strength of state regulations, and that also is my second question as well. But having a model for a state retrenchment while also recognizing the transnational character of corporations, and that while these may touch down in certain locations, and unless you have a global model that is quite difficult to capture the span of their...
Yeah, you're right. It's a very good point.
And also, I wasn't sure, what mechanisms are you talking about? Is this judicial review? Are you talking about
no, I'm talking about judicial review because I think that legislation after Citizens United pretty much we kind of lost that battle. I'm not sure how we can actually make the legislation that we need. Some of it, yeah. I'm not sure that it's going to be like the main thing because corporations, hold Congress, or so.
I guess it seems to me that there's a tension between this, the case-by-case basis that you're talking about,
Yeah.
judicial review, which gives the specificity that you're looking for,
Yeah.
with these universal paradigms, which
Right.
seem to be more of a legislative.
Yeah, you're actually right. Maybe I'm kind of leaning on the Israeli experience here, that the court was, this whole hybrid entity doctrine was completely court made up thing. They were, just common law of the Israeli Supreme Court. So I was thinking along the same lines. Okay, if you took us this far, why not do the extra step? But maybe I should think about legislation as well. Although I must say I'm skeptic about the whether legislation can work. But if it does,
As a Canadian, my sense of sort of the regulatory role of the state perhaps is different than the Americans might consider.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine a shift to a vulnerability model that doesn't involve very strong legislative models.
Yeah.
Or
there was a proposition by one of the UN committees to have a human responsibilities charter that said how people should take care of one another in case they can and all that. And the US voted against it and it went to oblivion. So, but I wish, it would be wonderful. It's the way to go, legislation, not judicial review. But at least in Israel, I think, well, thanks. Yeah.
You were talking about the cigarette situation, I was thinking that one of the reasons that the company should bear the cost of the no smoking enforcement would be because with a regulatory state, they could outlaw cigarettes altogether. There could be a prohibition. So actually, they're bearing those costs is a way to avoid that more drastic regulatory response.
Exactly. I think that it raises a really good point because it all connects to where our baseline lies, right? So that's, and I kept thinking when I read the court's decision, I kept thinking, well, why do you assume that the state has to bear all costs of that? And what you're saying is kind of makes it sharper.
But I think it also shows the potential power. I think that we too often give up on the state, and this whole notion that the state is less powerful, that the state can't do things. And I don't think it's that the state can't do it. I think that the state won't do it.
That's true.
And it's how how we could bring pressure on the state to be a responsible actor.
Yeah.
Because there's an example of what the state could do if it was motivated to.
Yeah. I think this kind of relates to what Stu was saying before about the international character of these corporations. In fact, that they always threaten that they'll go away.
Well,
they won't invest.
They go away from the United States and go away from Israel and go away from where are they going?
Exactly. I agree, but they wouldn't listen. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's also maybe related to what you were saying. I was thinking of, you were saying twice that two things related to each other. That one of your aims was to do away with public and private divide. And then you said in the end that one of your aims was to change discourse.
Yeah.
In relation to this, how? And this has to do in legislation or state, from the states?
I was
to do away, I agree with that, to do away, that you can do away with many aspects.
Yeah,
How can you do away?
The point is when what I had in mind was courts. And I'm thinking that when a case comes to the court, then it would not say the bus company is private, and therefore it's irrelevant, go away. It would say, I don't care what kind of body it is, I care about what kind of responsibility this entity has for its conduct. If it's big, if it's involved in our lives, if it's a network of relationship, if it benefits from us, then it should be responsible for other things that do not coincide with its business interests. But like Stu was saying, I should probably think about the legislation more, maybe from a hopeful perspective of Canada. So. No, okay.
It's really interesting and important.
Thanks.
Question.
Yeah.
Is there any country that does this well, that models this kind of behavior?
I'm not an expert on comparative law, but I was talking to Barbara earlier, and she told me about that in Italy, when someone wants to adopt a child, and they say that they do not want this race or the other race because they are, and they want their kid to be, then this is considered discriminatory, and you cannot do that. And I was thinking how you can't get more intimate than that, right? I mean, this is a private person making a private choice about the family. I'm not saying that families are all private, and not that, but like this is kind of an intimate thing, and yet the country, the state of Italy decides to say, no, you cannot make this choice, right? So you prefer the idea of equality over the freedom of the individual. And I think this is what we need to do here, because the idea behind state action is to say we need to have individuals do what they want. We cannot impose the entire Constitution on individuals. They can do whatever they want. This is like the basic idea of what America is about, right? And I think we need to start thinking about what kind of freedom. Every kind of freedom for everyone in every situation. I'm thinking, well, maybe no. Maybe it's time to change the way we think about that. That private actor does not necessarily mean someone who deserves the not absolute, but a wide scope of freedom in every kind of decision that this private actor makes. So.
Yeah, I really like that example. I like the good examples. So we often have so easy finding the bad examples, right? It would be interesting to do a comparative survey to find those good examples. I'm thinking, when you tell me about Barbara's example, I'm thinking about the sister reproduction in Sweden. It's very common in the States, I'm sure, as well. In Sweden, 1 out of 10 children are well, the origin is sister reproduction. And we have very clear rules on that. It's done by private clinics, but it's you're not allowed to choose sex or color or ethnic origin or whatever. You cannot choose that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and I'm sure that's quite a lot of those rules. So the good examples.
Yeah.
Sometimes a very interesting way.
No, because they make you think about, okay, private doesn't mean the freedom to do everything.
No,
some social values are more important in some cases, sometimes, not always. I'm not, going to be. Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about the bus company? Because it strikes me that even if the bus company was a government entity, a public entity, if there was objection from a neighborhood through which the bus was passing, they would change the ad, wouldn't they? I mean, it's not critical that they be a private entity in that example.
Well, I think it is critical in the sense that they removed women altogether from the entire campaign. And I think even if it was, the decision would be proportionate, then it would be different.
So you're thinking if it was a government entity that operated the buses, they would keep women
they
in
would,
the picture
surely.
in those neighborhoods.
No, maybe not in the, first of all,
In the neighborhoods.
yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the neighborhoods, maybe, but I'm sure that in the rest of the country, they would.
Why don't they take the bus out of the neighborhood? Put the women on the bus and take the bus out of the neighborhood. And and why don't they arrest and punish people who burn down billboards?
Oh, they try to. Yeah, they try to, but the bus company says, look, it's a risk, a business risk. We're not going to take it.
Well, I would take the bus out of the neighborhood. And if the community, if they want to hold those values, fine, but they're not going to be reinforced.
Yeah, this is a huge problem in Israel. They have segregated buses now, going from one religious neighborhood to the other. Sometimes, like, students would take them because they're way cheaper, of course, and they would have women in the back, and it's unbelievable. There's a big debate in Israel about that. Yeah, exactly. We have a few, but it's not but it's not enough. It needs to be a statement of the state, I think, that says this is intolerable, which, like you said before, the state won't. It's all politics. I mean, the religious parties. So it's a big problem. Yeah.
Continuing with the bus for a minute, is that not a matter of contract? Weren't they paying the bus company to display the ads?
Probably, yeah. They surely were, but I'm not sure about the contract part. Yeah, I need to reread the.
That would be kind of interesting to see what was in that.
Yeah, maybe through the doctorate, the contract law, you can do that.
The bus company now is in breach of the contract because
they
entered into a contract.
I'm actually not sure that the organization that sponsored the ads had that in the contract, or that it wanted to fight it. The appellants were a group of citizens unrelated to, maybe they got to even if, like, this organization that sponsored the campaign would have reached an agreement, a contractual agreement with the bus company, okay, just have men, that's fine. That wouldn't be fine in terms of society. And this is exactly what this group of citizens decided. So I'm not sure what actually happened in terms of the contract in this case. I'd have to look it up. But even if, yeah.
Dig into.
Yeah.
There's a real way to dig down into this and what really happened. And,
right. Yeah.
What was the pre-consisting?
Yeah, it's still pending, though. I mean,
who was paying the money? You know.
It's some kind of the organization is a nonprofit organization thing, so I don't know.
Not a government.
No, not a government. Otherwise, maybe they would have tracked it back to the state somehow. Yeah. But no. Actually, the state's attorney wrote a beautiful response to this, saying that it shouldn't have happened, and it was great because they had the Minister of Transportation also on the petition. So the government's representative was part of the case, and it was really impressive how the state sees this issue as a huge thing also. But we're still waiting to see what the court decides.
So it's really a matter of public policy.
Yeah.
And if the government decides it's a matter of public
policy. What do you mean it's a matter of public policy?
The government is weighing different policies. Right?
But the government had nothing to do with it, with the bus company example. It's just that when they went to court, this group of citizens had how do you say, those who respond to a petition, to an appeal, or the defendants. So they had defendant 1, the bus company, defendant 2, the Minister of Transportation. So they had, that's great, yeah. Yeah.
Understanding of responsibility.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm misreading her, but my understanding of her most hugely published work is a very intersubjective understanding of responsibility. Right? And so it is similar to vulnerability. It's our humanity that makes us tie to each other, and these are the
exactly the networks of relationships. Yeah. That's the.
Yeah, but I wonder how that applies in a corporate context, unless you're talking about corporate personhood, or what sort of corporate intersubjectivity can you have if there's not a person? That's the foundation for
Because, yeah, you're right about that, but I think it could be modified into because the insights of that, I think, apply. Two examples in this context. The first is Google. Once the Gmail servers I know in entire Israel, but I think like in the US or something went out for like a few hours. And people went crazy. You can't send emails and when he came back, there was a piece about it in the papers. People were talking about Gmail like it's their long lost brothers. Right? Gmail is back. I can't believe it. It's wow. I missed it so much, and I couldn't live without it. And so it does create. I know Gmail doesn't care, right? But it does in our lives have this meaning. Okay, think about Facebook, the way we interact with each other. So it's a platform for relationships. What Facebook decides kind of shapes the way we interact with each other. So I do think it's not this intersubjective thing, but it is a network of relationships that we do have with corporations.
It's not clear what then their response is. I agree that from the human side, in which we, as embodied beings, we use the emails.
They live because of it.
Their interest is not necessarily the well-being of people that depend on those networks, unless there's some sort of financial incentive.
Yeah, no, I think that their money-making depends on us thinking about this, having these emotions towards the product.
But that's quite far away from young understanding what responsibility entails.
I don't think it's that far away. I haven't, actually what I took from reading that was the network of relations and not the intersubjectivity. Not the fact that there's a caring person on one side and another caring person. Maybe it's too far away, but I think then that would be great because it would be like a whole new idea, which is better. But no, I'm just kidding. But I think there are relationships between ourselves and at least mediated by these corporations. And I don't know if you've seen, there's this, I think, Canadian movie, The Corporation. And there's a section where people on the person who made the film is interviewing people on the street. He said, I'm going to give you a name of a corporation and you tell me what you think about it. And he said Disney, and people said goofy, cool, nice. He said, so people do think about Nike, cool and hype and whatever. So people do think about these corporations in ways that make them feel attached.
No, actually, I was thinking of that piece when I asked the question, actually. Because the culmination of the film and in the book is that corporations are sociopaths, right?
Right, yeah.
They actually don't have capacity for feeling or for care. So within the framework of responsibility, if we put half the expectation of response upon a sociopath, whether it's subjective or not, I just wonder what we then expect in terms of any kind of...
So I completely agree. The thing is that this is regulation from without, right? I'm not counting on the corporation to do it itself. Evidently, it doesn't, and it won't. I'm counting on someone from the outside say, you cannot conduct yourself this way anymore. You make a living off having people like you, need you, then you have to be there. Not to be there the way a person would be, but not to leave them without a job in a town that relies on this one plant, something that comes from without. But it's a really interesting point. I haven't thought of it, so thanks.
But you could, I was just thinking about this, Ani Satz uses vulnerability to talk about animals, right? And so one of the ways that I think about her work is that human beings put animals in situations of dependency because we domesticate them.
Exactly.
And that's the basis for the responsibility. So you could think about corporate responsibility in the same way. And this is what I think maybe the Israeli Supreme Court is getting at when they talk about this hybrid entity. So that it's, or the vital public service idea or the monopoly. Because then in both of those situations, if it's a vital service like Google, which you really can't live without, or if it's a monopoly, then the users are dependent
Exactly.
on that entity in a way that so, I mean, that doesn't
That's
get
a
you
wonderful point.
all the way there.
Yeah.
It gets you, it certainly gets you part of the way there.
Yeah, I agree. I think this, combined with the idea of relationships, I think it kind of
But
does great
what
work.
you want to do is to extend that to relationships where we're not in a position of dependency, but we have choice. And I think that's going to be the difficult thing. So it's not, it's the difference between Nike and Google.
That in relation to Nike, we have a choice, and in relation to Google,
Yeah,
we don't.
in relation to Nike,
It's a false choice, though, isn't it? I mean, it's either Nike or Reebok or Foot Locker, okay? And they all behave exactly the same. So I can choose between one and the other, but it's a choice between similars.
Well,
So.
but I do think the argument about being put in a position of dependency, so not vulnerability, but dependency, applies to the food
Yeah, yeah,
producers
that's-
and to, yeah, there's all sorts of corporations that would,
Yeah.
that would apply to, but just thinking through that. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.